The Beitza, the Chav Beitza with
What
Beitz.
was the cooler in? The cooler was in the fact that he's letting them do Carbon Pesach style, or the cooler is that he's letting them roast.
Two Gemara Beitzas from upstairs, two Gemara Shkayach.
What's the cooler? That he's letting them do something Carbon Pesach style, or the cooler is that he's letting them roast it? Where's the cooler?
Kolus. Lashon over there is Mukulos. Mukulos means the way the Pesach was roasted.
Right.
Whole, not standing, and the insides on the side of it look like a soldier, right? With weapons.
Yeah.
That's what it says in the Mishnah. We're going to learn the Gemara, and then we'll have. I took out the Shulchan Aruch also, so we'll see what the Indian is. Yeah. Okay. So last time we Pasha didn't finish. We were in the middle of an Indian, and I think the Inyanim were not so clear because we were rushing through and we didn't yet get through it. So we'll go back a little bit. We'll say Bekitzer what the Mishnah says. We were holding the Gemara. Daf Chav Beis Amud Beis Iboiluhu, and Iboiluhu is 2-3 lines from the bottom of Chav Beis Amud Beis. Before we start, just to mention a short akdam. The Mishnah says there are 3 inyanim, 3 halachas that Ram Gamliel was more mekel. Before in the Mishnah we had 3 things. He was machmir like Beshama, even though he himself is from Hillel, is from Beis Hillel. He's descendant from Hillel, Hazakim. In this Mishnah we have 3 inyanim, 3 things that he was mekel over the Chachamim, and all these things in the Chachamim did not agree with him. Okay, so right away you see they did not agree with him, and he was mekel over them. The first thing was that he said you're allowed to sweep on Yom Tif crumbs that are on a small area between 2 beds, between the beds that they would eat. So the Mishnah said one thing he was makel, that you could put the wine there, that he let them sweep, and we discussed in Rashi, sweeping on Shabbos and Yom Tov is a problem, especially the floors, the earthen floors, because you're mashve gumais. Yeah. And if you're sweeping indoors, and Ashvas gumais is a malach of boina, doing it outdoors, and you mashve gumais is a problem. Chodesh, that was discussed. That's the first. He allowed it. The Meiri, I think, or the Shonim explain, because our Gemara doesn't tell us the Svaras Machlokes why he allowed it and why they said that it's not allowed. They explained because the machlokes there was, it's a small area, and in that area it's a very small chance that there's going to be gumais, holes that he's going to be filling. And the other one said, that's the first thing. The second nukudah, that will be the main sugi of today, the second din about, Mishnah says he would allow manichim es hamugmar b'yom tif. He would allow to make a mugmar, Rashi explains, taking spices, levoin, frankincense, or any other psamim, putting it onto coals. When you're putting it onto the coal, first of all, a little bit of the coal is being extinguished. So you have here the malacha of mechabe, and then the psamim itself is being lit. So you have the malacha of ma'avir, of igniting. Of course, it's Yom Tif, and you're allowed to put on fire, put off fire, if you're doing l'tzoyrich or yichol nefesh. That's clear. The shaila here is this mugmar creating a smell, a fragrance, a smell. For what purpose are you doing it? Why are you doing it? And how's it connected to yichol nefesh exactly? And there'll be 2 nukudis here. First of all, we're speaking about 3 things. First of all, creating a smell that the smell should be in the house. Pashut, you should have a nice smell, like an ear freshener.
Maybe it's for good.
Wait, that's one nekudah. Okay. Second thing is about doing it on godim, putting clothing on top of this smoke, that the clothing should get a good smell. And the third thing we'll discuss in our sugya is creating the smell for peiros, for fruit, or even food or drink. And Shulchan Aruch Lamashal speaks about the koyanim, that they wash their hands to birchas koyanim, and they want to wash their hands with water that has a good smell to it, an odor, a good incense or a smell. So they would put some spicy shemen inside the water to wash their hands to have a nice smell. It's not allowed, or it is allowed. Look at the Shulchan Aruch. It's not just not allowed. Even if you created the water before Yom Tif, the kohen shouldn't wash his hands with it because he's creating the new smell on his hands. So let's forget. So 3 inyanim here: creating a smell in the environment, creating a smell on godim, creating a smell on fruits. Okay, on food, the fruits, Beitas. Now, in these three inyanim, there's two elements here. One is the result, and one is how you're getting to the result. Meaning, if there was already before Yom Tov already this coals with the levoina already giving out a smell, a smoke, it's still problematic, perhaps, to take clothing and put it over it on Yom Tov, because the result of creating a new reach in your clothes is a problem. Or, we'll see, even creating a new reich in your fruit could be a problem. Creating a new reich in your house, what's wrong? You put it on before Yom Tov. There's no mamoshes, it's just a reich in the house. The discussion of the mission is not the result. It's how you're getting to the result. You're putting on the fire. You're actually igniting. You're doing the fire. So there's two things. Later in the Gemara, we'll discuss the union of putting smell into peiros or clothing without doing the malacha of mechabe and mavir. It's there before Shabbos. Am I allowed to do that or not? But the Mishnah was discussing about doing the malacha of mechabe and mavir, extinguishing the fire when you are throwing the levoina onto the coal, and the mavir by grinding the levoina. The Mishnah says, Rabbi Gamliel says it's allowed to. The Gemara came to the maskana. What is he talking about? And in what case are they arguing? About the environment. Not the begodim. No. The Havmina was the arguing about the begodim. The maskana is from last year that the begodim kula alma moide, you can't do it. And we're speaking about creating a fire. You can't go and do a malacha to get a nice odor in your clothes.
Why not? Why wasn't?
Why not? We had in the shir 2 shiurim ago, very important klal, we'll have also for today. Tzorech oichel nefesh is not limited indeed to mamish consuming food. You're allowed to put on logs in your fireplace because your whole body is also getting warm. You could do that on Yom Tov. But it has to be something tzorech kol adam. Not just wealthy or mefunokim or delicate people that they need to have clothing smelling nicely. For them, they need it. That's not good enough to allow every Yid or even them to go do it on Yom Tov.
That's why showers on Yom Tov is prohibited.
Oh, right. Because today maybe it's something that's regular. Exactly. That's the Indian about that. We had it a few weeks ago. Sure. We had it in the Mishnah. Yeah. So the shayla about clothing is doing a melacha, putting on a fire in order to get the clothes to smell nice, even though you have hanor from it. So your whole goof is having hanor. What type of people? These are high society or very fancy people, and the hameinam, the regular people, don't care for it. They don't even want it. They want to have they don't want to have the special smell. So therefore, it's not soirich kol adam. We bought the Gemara Ksubis, Mashal Beila, soirich kol adam. Therefore, even though you're doing a chabura by a psula, you could do it because you're doing a malacha. Soirich hanor, kol adam. Capturing a tzvi, if you have a tzvi, if you have a hirsch, a deer, and you happen to have a deer before Yom Tov in your house was captured, could you go and shecht it? Yeah, the Gemara in Kesubah says, listen, who eats deer? Only very wealthy people eat deer, so maybe we shouldn't be able to allow to shecht the deer. It's already captured before Yom Tov, yeah? To shecht it because this meat. Then Gemara defines it, no, actually everyone likes deer meat. The only thing is, the poor people can't afford it. So we discussed already in the other shiurim, very important. The finish is not just the accessibility, is not called not the tzorech. Everyone would like to eat deer meat. The only thing is, they don't have money. Not everyone has the money to afford it. So you can't call that not tzorech kol adam. So that's called tzorech. So we have to figure out, Chazal, to figure out which things are tzorech kol adam and not. Clothing and odor in clothing is called, according to Gemara before, it's not tzorech kol adam for sure. Some people they don't want it. So not most people don't need it. Therefore, one is not allowed l'kula alme to do a malacha, an av malacha of mechabe and mavir in order to create a smell in your clothing. However, the machlokes of our Mishnah is about creating a smell in the environment. The same idea. The Gamliel says it's a tzorech kol adam. Everyone likes to have a nice smell in their homes, and therefore spraying is not a malacha. I'm saying therefore you can even do a malacha of putting a fire. Yeah, about making a fire to create the odor. the Chachamim don't agree. They say no. It's only those that we had in Rashi, the first Rashi, those that have a negative smell, a bad odor, and the house smells bad, and they need to have it. Some people that are very mufunakim, they always have to have a good smell, a very fresh smell. And the Hamayna, the Chachamim hold, most people don't even want it. It's disturbing. They're having food, they're having family. They don't want to have this extra levoina smell in their house. That's Machlekes Rabbi Gamliel and the Chachamim in the Mishnah.
If it's Shavah Kol Nefesh?
That is the machlokes. Is it Shavah L'Kol Nefesh or not?
It's argument in the
That's
Tzias.
right. Good. That's Chazal. Many things. Chazal. That's when you have the sticking point where everyone agrees if it's called nefesh, yes, not. The shaila is this called nefesh or not? And they have to go. The Grunterin to the Chazals. Why did he say this? At least that's as far as machlokes.
Not everyone puts on perfume every day.
You could have
Some
debate today
people put
also.
on perfume every day. Many people don't.
And I'm sure if you want to go to more details, it depends what levoina may be strong or not. So I'm sure there's many pratim. You could take this apart. It's not so black and white.
Yeah.
What kind of smell? Even in perfume, you have deodorants that have a smell. Some are more simple, some not. Perforated that gives a perfume smell to it or not. So you have even soap, hand soap. So there's all pratim and pratim about. But let's get the general. The kud here is the arguing is putting smell into your clothing. Seirech kol adam or not.
Okay.
That's very important to kud. Okay, and if it is seirech kol adam, you could do a malach gemura of mechab and mavir to put smell into your clothing. What's about into fruits?
You see in different areas in Shas where mugmar was part of the meal process. Meaning you want to tiny that what the house is part of Eichel Nefesh.
The mugbar is inhaled.
No,
inhale
it was right, but it was a process that came
After
after,
the meal.
you finish eating. You
Oh,
went
not-
to the
yeah,
you
no,
went to do mugmar.
To inhale it.
Right.
Yeah, not the clothing. Yeah, that's
Maybe
a
say it,
issue.
but it was
That's-
the incense was part of that.
You did spices.
Yeah, okay.
That
It's
is
called- it's called-
no, they burnt them.
They burnt them.
Yeah.
They read that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It says if you
It's
take
like
the
you
spices,
run-
A
You
weekday
can-
meal and a
and
weekday
the
meal.
wine
You
And a
can have
weekday meal.
the fire, the smelling, the smoke that comes from sticks. On Yitka, they use
Incense.
It's incense.
That's-
Incense. Yeah.
I'm saying I don't
So-
unless you have a source where you read it,
Of course, I have
because
a
they
source
say
where
to
I
hold
read
it in this hand and the wine in this hand and the spices in this hand.
Psomim. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
psomim. Yeah. But then you have la'ashen is habayis. To
whole
make
different
this,
word.
that's what we're speaking here about. La'ashen is habayis.
That's what I'm
And
asking.
actually, in our Gemara, the loshen, when it says legameir, means to make something else smell.
And nowadays, we have,
And the house is called la'ashen, to create smoke in the house. Because you're not.
nowadays it's a diffuser. You diffuse. You use a diffuser.
Diffusing,
You plug it in.
Yeah. So that's what we're holding. So we're holding that the machlekes in our Mishnah is about creating an odor in the environment in your house, right?
Okay.
And Rabbi Gamliel is mekil and says you could. It's a kol adam, and the Chachamim say no, you can't do a malacha. Do a malacha. Maybe spraying a ear refreshener. If it's not a malacha to spray, that's not a problem because, like we said in the beginning of this year, the result of having smoke in your environment is nothing wrong.
Mhm.
We'll see soon by this year. There's creating a reyach. Yeah,
So
that's not even if there's a malacha. There's no malacha there. That's like I said. You have pre-existing coals that are giving out smell before Yom Tov. You take your shirt and you put it over it. Yeah. So here there's a new union of your meilid areyach. Yeah. Iludi kamelid reicha. You're creating a new smell, and that's a whole. In Yom Tov, even the peiros. I'll never go into the details there. That creating smell. Why are you creating smell in the peiros? When you're ma'ashing your peiros, when you're giving your peiros a good smell with the levoino, you want the taste to be better. In that case, of course, no problem. You could put spice into your dish, and even though it gives a nice odor, the main thing is you want it to taste better. Or do you want the food to smell better? If you want your food to smell better, it's problematic. If you want the food to taste better with this good smell, then it's allowed. So go to Shulchan Aruch with the pratim about when is it allowed, Pasha, today to do malacha to create a smell in food and when not.
It's interesting. Smell in food
Yeah.
is maybe 50% of taste. You can't if you can't taste, you can't smell, or the opposite. So smell is critical
Right.
to taste in food.
Yeah, so I'm not going to. Yeah, so, exactly. So I'll tell you. Is it?
I know, for example,
Look like this. Just read the beginning of Zion. Afilu la'ashin peiros. Yeah, to make peiros smell. Ein heter, he goes, fine line. Ein heter ella shemiskaven kedei sheyiklutu hapeiros tam haboisem. You want the peiros should get the tam of the psamim, and it's going to be better for you to eat it. Avol osur la'ashin peiros. You can't be ma'ashin the peiros. Kedei sheyiklutu reyach haboisem. That they should get a reich the boisem. Uba achilosei. So you want to have hana, but you want to have hana from the taste of that good boisem smell, or you have hana from the smell that while you're eating, you're going to have a good smell. So he goes into the pratim, the kuntazachim. So we're not going to go into this, like we say, it's not a halacha shir today, it's a gemara shir. I'm just giving you the it's not so pashit, but the nekuda here is creating a smell. That's going to be a reach in your peiros. Depends what you're doing. But definitely, if it's not for the sake of taste, just for the sake of smell, while you're eating, you want to have a nice smell, it's not good enough reason to do a malacha. Do a malacha. Now, what's about not a malacha gemura? That's doing a malacha, meaning taking levayna, putting it onto the gachelis, onto the coals, creating a smell, putting your fruit on top of it, then you have out to them. Now, what's about, you're not doing a malacha. You have a pre-existing device that's giving out the smell before Yom Tif, and you want to take your peta and put it on top of it. That's another issue. That's going to be an issue of you're creating a reach hasar isa deraisa at all, because there's no malacha there. Putting levoina on the coal is a malacha gemura. You're doing mechabe and you're doing mavi. Only thing is, are you allowed to do it? But if you're not doing a malacha gemura, you're only doing a shavus, which is a gzedach. You're creating a new reyach in a peda that didn't have the reyach before. There you have another halacha. We're not so machmir. So then it's going to be a different shot. Anyways, I was just an introduction to the sugya. Let's get into the sugya about creating a reyach in begodim. We did already last sugya. Creating a reyach in the environment. We did already last sugya. Now we're going to have the sugya of creating a reyach into the pedis. And again, let's talk. There's two yonim here. There's one doing a malacha to get that reich into the peiros, or there is the fact that the reich is coming to the peiros. Am I allowed to be the one that I am accomplishing reich coming to peiros, even though I'm not doing malacha gemura? That's going to be our union. Let's start.
I know that in the Persian community, they like to have the food having a nice smell. So before it comes to the table, they sprinkle on it rose water. So,
for what purpose? To taste? Not to taste,
no,
the smell.
Not taste, an aroma.
That's what he means. That's not what he means. It's a very, when you learn the halacha, you're like, you know what he means? Like, what does it mean? I'm giving a taste, I'm giving a smell that when I'm eating it, I should what? I should smell the smell. So that's exactly what he means. What should not be done. It's not called, you don't need it for the taste itself. But if you're doing it, that your taste.
But there's no burning, no nothing. There's just sprinkling on it.
Oh, okay. So if they would do malacha, that would be our shaila. You know, if they do malacha together. So what are they sprinkling it?
Rose water.
Rose water. Push the water itself. That
rose
water
has rose. Rose. In the bottle,
so before Shabbos, it did it. So it's also like I told you before.
No, you buy it. You buy rose water. That's
we have in Shulchan Aruch. Normally, it says to put the psamim, the oil that has a good smell to it, putting it into the water, so the water should have a good smell. The kohen can wash their hands and have a good smell. That is a problem. Now, what's about if you already have water that's already mixed, prepared? The only thing the kohen is doing, he's just washing his hands. It's also a problem because the hand before had no smell. Now the hand has a smell. So you're not creating smell in the water, but you're creating smell where? On the person's hand. Here also. I don't know. You're creating your smell on the food. Oh, that's an issue as well. I'm saying it could be in Yonim. All these shouts you have to look into Shulchan Aruch, ask Rav. We shouldn't take from here Piskei Dinim, that we're passing halachas. Not at all. It's mamish just
that aerosol in the, like people spray in the bathroom. Aerosol. You're not allowed to do it. So
moil the reicha, but the reicha is not going on over mamash. It's not interesting. We have to go into this time. He was speaking about putting it on clothing and on oichel. Where you create the reich, nicht in the Welt rein. You're attaching it to something. So that's called your mail. Here you made the reich where. Moshe, we're going to have soon the Gemara. You're allowed to cut a atzei psamim. So the atzei psamim itself did not give out a smell because it's still closed in the
cut the grass.
What's it called?
In
the stalks, those. Yeah. So it's closed. Like you could cut it and it gives out a nice smell. So you're saying you could do that. You could do, but that's not defined as creating. Why? You're not putting it anywhere. It's not going anywhere. But when you're taking a smell and applying it to something, a beged or a peda, it's even worse. But I don't think it's allowed. I'm saying, but that's just the Yonim.
Okay.
A lot of Gedorim. Let's start. Iboilu. The Shaila was asked. 3 lines from the bottom. Mahu la'ashen. Now, la'ashen here means la'ashen pedas. Look, we could keep one finger on the Gemara, one finger on Rashi, 5 lines from the bottom. Mahu la'ashen, says Rashi, pedos, ba'ashan psomim, likloit tam haboisim. Am I allowed to be ma'ashen pedos? Before we spoke about the ear, before we spoke about clothing, what's about pedos? So, says back to Gemara, Maula Ashen, the name of Rav says, also it's not allowed. Shmuel, that means you're doing a malacha here. We're speaking here about a malacha to be ma'ash and ma'ash and pedis. Later we'll speak about if it's not a malacha, if it's there already, could I simply make the pedis smell without me doing the malacha of mechab and mavi? That comes later. But now we're speaking about doing the malacha of putting levoina onto the coals in order to mash and pedis. Rav says Asur. Shmuel Omar Mutter. And I see the halacha. I see the oyster way like Shmuel. You're allowed to do this. I'm halacha gemara to do it. What's it? Rav Huna Omar Asur. He explained why it's Asur. Mipnei shemechabe. Pashat. He said the malacha is mechabe. What's malacha mechabe? You're putting the levoina on the coals. You're mechabe. Now, but I'm soon going to ask right away. You're also doing mavir. And it means, yeah, you're right, doing mavir as well. We just said the first malacha you're doing. You're doing first mechabe by throwing the levoina, the frankincense, on the coal. You're first extinguishing a little bit of the ember of the fire from the coal. And the second thing you're doing is going to be mavir. What are you doing mavir on? The levoina itself is getting burnt. But he mentions here mechabe just because we'll see. So that was the first malacha you're doing, but really he means you're doing both. Now, the other Madam, Shmuel knows you're doing both, doesn't argue. He knows if you put levaina on coals, Shmuel doesn't argue that was, you put levaina on coals, you're not doing mechabe. No. Shmuel agrees with Rav that when you put levaina on coals, you're doing mechabe, and you're doing mavir. But just like we said, he says you're allowed to do it. The Seirach Kol Adam. Everyone likes to have pedis that way.
Until you get the smell.
Yeah, but the shaila is this putting smell into fruit, Seirach Kol Adam or not? So they're not arguing if the activity of putting levaina on coal is defined as mechab and mavir. No, that's not a machlekes about that. They're simply arguing, like we said before, tzorech kol adam or not. Let's look into Rashi. So let's first finish about it. Mechab also
the putting smoking fruit.
Yeah, to smoke the fruit.
The bambus, there could be a type of bishul, because you have, for example, fish.
Yeah.
You smoke it.
Makes it ready for For Shabbos will be But
Yom Tov, I'm saying.
No, Yom Tov proud. Yom Tov actually Yom Tov. So Yom Tov is not proud.
But I'm saying over there, it's giving the fish on odor, and at the same time it's cooking.
It's make it ready. It's raw. You can't eat it before it gets smoked. So, but Shabbos here must be Yom Tov. You're allowed to cook for. You have to cook everything.
So what's the kasha with paydas then?
What are you doing? No, what are you doing? If you're doing for the reach, like we said before, you're doing it for that.
But you're eating the fruit.
Stop shat raw. Not speaking. Or not. You're right. If we speak about raw, let's say couscous, for example, that's very grain. That's very easy. Even if it's not, you're just pouring on some hot water and it already comes. It's called kali habishul. Or you're speaking about smoked salmon with the salmon or the raw salmon. You can't eat a little bit of smoke is good. Then there's no shaila because you make it from raw edible. Sure, Yom Tov you can do it. But here, no fruit you can eat. It's an apple. It's an apple, you make a smoked apple.
You didn't have to.
Sure, it's ready. But you're right. Very, very good point you're making. We're not speaking about fruit that are raw or can't be eaten, or potatoes where they can't be eaten when it's not smoked. And now we're smoking to make it edible. No, you're right, 100%. Very important to mention. We're speaking about potatoes that you can eat. There's no shy of preparing it. But I want to have it to be a luxury, nice fruit that have a nice smell. And wealthy people have this all the time. That's how they eat their fruit, apparently. And that's a machlekes if it's tzorech kol adam or not. Is everyone benefiting, likes to eat their fruit or not? So let's finish up with the Gemara. First, Nachman, the name let the master Rabbi say, why did you chap on only mechabes? He answered, you're right. I mean both malachas. I just mention the first malacha. Let's look into Rashi now. What's going to be the machlekes here? They're arguing about is it considered a malacha or not? No. Osur, Rashi, Osur. Yeah. The tifuk, the tifnuk yisera, like from Russian, pinuk. It's an extra. It's delicate. It's spoiled. Yeah. I'm a funik. Yeah, I'm a funik person. The tifnuk yisera. The ain ve'ein shava l'chol nefesh, as you mentioned, right? It's not shava l'chol nefesh. Elo li'istenis. Only to those that are Eastern, very delicate people, they like to have their fruit in this way. But Hayoshan, what's the problem of making Oshan? Pashit. Hayoshan, Ika, Av Malacha. It's an Av Malacha, the Mefarish Abuna, Abuna says, Taime, the Rav is me, Preshu, Mechabe, Hagacholim. You're doing Mechabe, extinguishing the Gecholim when you're putting the Levayin on top. When you're putting the powder of the Psalm on top of the Gecholim, you're creating Mechabe. Shmuel Mamuter, why say Mutter? He holds the Echel Nefeshu. Taka anim can't afford it, but doesn't mean they don't like it. That's the word. It's not found to them. They don't have the money to pay for it. Not like clothing where we discussed last year. No, anim don't need it. They don't want it. Even if you can pay it to them. So it says similar to dummy. I mentioned before. If someone happened to have a tzvi and yomtiv, a deer. So most people don't eat deer. Kedam rinon miksubis, as mentioned before, the Gemara concludes it's called Seirach Kaladim because everyone likes deer, just they can't afford it. As we explained before, what mechabe is, you're not to have malacha because of this making the fruit. That's just one of who's explaining why you should, being it's av malacha of mechabe and mavir, therefore, and it's not shav l'chol nefesh, therefore you can't do it. He asked him back, why do you mention only mechabe, maybe also mention mavir? The name of malat mavir, because you're igniting the psalmim itself. So psalmim, what are you doing mavir in? You're igniting your mavir the psalmim. Shagam zev melacha. Amalei, you're right. You're right. What mitchilosei mechabe v'seif mavir. Beginning, you're doing mechabe, then doing mavir. With tarvai, you have a bay. We have both of these malachas in this activity. No, come on, act. I just hopped on. I mentioned the first malacha that the person will be doing, which is going to be mechabe. Now let's go back to the Gemara. Now we're done with the from Peiris. This sugi is also going to be vital about Peiris. Says the Gemara like Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Up until now, we spoke about doing a malacha gemura in order to be ma'ash and the Peira. Now we're speaking about not a malacha gemura. If you already have pre-existing ishun in your house, could I put a Peira over it? But he doesn't go straight to that. He discusses first a case where it's not the typical mechab and mavir. Where you have a piece of cheres, an earthenware piece of powder, where it's boiling hot. You can actually fry eggs on it. You can do things with it, and you're going to put the levoin, the psamim, on top of the piece of boiling cheres, and that will create the psamim will start giving out smoke, and then you want to smoke your peiros. So mechab you don't have here. Because there is no fire, there is no live fire here to say that by you putting the psamim on top of the hot piece of cheres, you are being mechabe what? A fire in the cheres. The cheres is no fire there, it's just boiling hot. But the shaila is when the psamim catch the heat of the cheres, it gives out a smoke. Is that called mavir? Is that called lighting a fire? Right? That's going to be shaila. So we're going to have a Rashi Tosfos. We're going to learn this Rashi today about what the inyan is. Rashi says that, like we explained, there's no mechabe l'kula almid because there's no fire you're putting out when you're throwing the levoyin on top of the piece of cheres. Rashi says the mavir you're doing on the psamim is called kalach yad. It's not a regular way, so it's not a malacha gemura. It's not the way you make fire. You have psamim. Normally you do it with fire itself. It's not the way you create smoke. You create smoke on psamim. How do you do it? You put it onto coals. That's called the regular derech. But you put it on the piece of cheres, it's called kalach yad. Tosfos disagrees with Rashi. Tosfos says no. People do this all the time. It's a regular way of igniting psamim, taking something boiling hot, a piece of metal or a piece of cheres, putting psamim on top of it, and then it's going to make it gross. It's a regular way of doing of lighting the psamim, and therefore it's considered malacha gemura. Why would this be different than the case before, putting it onto the gecholim, putting it onto the gecholim itself? Tosfos discusses another gang over here in our Gemara, depending on the machlokes b'chlal, if mavir is as strict as the other malachas of Shabbos. We know it's a Rashi and Vayakel brings down the Gemara that we have lamed tes malachas. We know it because it says lisasa we shouldn't do malacha next to malachas hamishkan. We know we have lamed tes malachas hamishkan. Why does the pasuk go and say Lo Sevaru Eish B'Chol Mishvasechem? He takes it out. He's Yoitza Lama Yotza. So there's two ways of learning why the Torah took it out. But there's definitely a message here. The shaila is, what is the message? It doesn't do that, right? The message is, like the halacha that we paskin is, the message is just that if a person does more than one malacha, he has to bring more than one chatas by mistake. For example, he did choyresh and did zereya, and then he did keitzer, and then he chapped, it's Shabbos today. So do you say that it's all one malacha? It's called, you say malachis chalukos or not chalukos? Wouldn't know. Had the Torah not taken one malacha and separated it and mentioned it separately, then being the pasuk before was all malachas together, leisasa kol malacha. That means if you do kol malachis behelam echad with one unknowing, then you're going to bring only one chatas. Now the Torah said took one of those malachas and separated it, so it's called lechalik yotzos. It went out yotza lechalik to make it chiluk. That means you're going to have to bring a chatas in every single malacha. That's how we know. That's the din. Another Tane, Rabbi Yossi, a whole different din. He says the Torah took it out to tell you it's not a typical malacha. You're not chayv nisa, not chayv skill on mavir. Mavir is an inferior type of malacha, lighting fire. And if he does mavir b'meiz, he's not chayv skilla. He's chayv just malchus like a lav. So, according to this Rabbi Yossi, that he holds that yotzos, the lashon over there is that lama yotza to only to be able on it only a lav. We'll see the lashon. Yeah. So he says that Yom Tif b'chlal you could do ma'av l'chatchila. It's a whole new shita here. If you hold that even Shabbos igniting a fire is not a real malacha chayv skila, so Yom Tif you're downgrading it to no malacha whatsoever. So even shaloi l'tzoyrech, we spoke before in the sugya, mitoich shehuter l'tzoyrech, huter shaloi l'tzoyrech, as with tzoyrech chtzas. This shit is going to say, you don't need not tzoyrech, nothing. It's called ma'avir levatolo. I want to light a fire just for no reason. According to that shita, you were allowed to, because the whole malacha of havara is not as serious as other malachas. It's the whole different gang. So again, Rashi is going to say, putting the psalm on the cheres. The reason why it's not ma'avir is because of shinui. It's not the way you do it. But we're following the regular. And Taisa is going to say the reason why, according to this Amayra here, putting the psalmim on the cheres that creates a smoke from the psalmim, it's going to be allowed. Not because it's not a shinui, it's a regular way of doing it, but you're allowed to light a fire on Yom Tif for no reason whatsoever. But indeed, mechabe is a regular malacha. This is only le'sevaru eish. That means mechabe, putting it as more strict according to that Tana, mechabe is more strict than mavir. Mavir is what only lav yotzas. That's lav yotzas. And mechabe like anything else. That's machlekes ashetes we're going to see in a moment. But let's first see machlekes amiroim. They're both arguing in the shita of Rav that Rav is machmir. According to Shmuel, b'chlal, you could even do malacha gemura to make you pay this, to lash in your pay this. We said before, right? Shalachol nefesh, yeah. According to Rav, it says it's a problem. Now, what would Rav say about cheres? Is that allowed? Because I'm not doing a malacha gemura. That's how machlik is now. Stehst? Talk to Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yehuda al gabe gacheles osur. According to Rav, to be ma'ash in your paydays, al gabi gacheles is going to be asur, as mentioned, because it's not shalachol nefesh according to Rav, and it's a malach gemura. Tapadam chav gimel medalef. Al gabi cheres muter. So he says muter, you're allowed to. If Rabbi Amar, af al gabi cheres nami asur, it's also going to be asur. Why? Anayzach mishum the kamoyle derecha, not the malacha. There's no malacha here. As we explained, either according to Rashi or according to Tosfos, there's no malacha of mechabe for sure not, and even no malacha of ma'avik alachiyad.
But that would be the preferred way of doing it on Yom Tov than on Cheres.
Yeah,
so you don't have to deal with the problems of
God. But now we're dealing with the result. When we started this year, this is the result, and this is how you get there. So up until now, we're discussing how you're getting there with the malacha gemura. Could you do it? But he was saying, forget about the malacha. There's no malacha whatsoever. There's a new problem. You can't come and create a new smell on a peda. Moiled. So it's nothing that you're doing the malacha to create the smell. You're not doing the malacha to create the smell in the Peder. It's considered it's the Rabbanan for sure, but you're like, Mila, you're doing a new thing, and the Chamur guys should not be Mila the Reicha. That's going to be the thing. That's the Svara. And then, and this, now we're having a case where someone today was putting perfume on also on your clothing or not, or in the Pedis. And then Rabbi Amtavayu, Sechufei, Kasa, Ashiroi, Bimitova Osur, to take a case, a cup full of psamim, and Shiroi means on your silk clothing, pouring it over to create an odor on your clothing. It's also my time, Mishum, the Kamel, the Recha, the Shem Kuda. You're not doing a malacha here, not lighting a fire, you just simply take the psamim that you put it on your keilah. On your clothes. So this would be a new nekuda we didn't discuss before about doing a malacha.
What does it mean, shiroi?
Shiroi is silk. That's not even today. Also silk clothing. I say
it says maybe reach b'shiroi. Rashi said b'shiroi means silk.
Silk, yeah, shiroi. The Gemara is also shiroi. No, that's not silk. How do you say Lashon Kodesh today in the Beitza silk?
Meshi.
A meshi. A shiroi is silk carpet. Now, Gemara said, we have a Gemara in Shabbos. It says you're allowed to be rub or atzip some, we said before, and creating a new smell. Or you could cut it. Also, hasam reicha mia isa, but isuf who come maisif. There was a reicha before it. You're making it come bigger, but you're not putting it onto anything new. Here, hacha. Says you're creating a new reich. I mean, so the idea of creating a new reich and also applying it to Begadim, that will be more of an issue. Let's do the Rashi and Tosfos now, or let's already.
In other words,
let's do Rashi and Tosfos now. Then we'll go to.
If you're transferring the reich, that's the problem.
So so that's the thing. So here the atzip samim, if you put it to your nose, you would smell something. But when you're cutting it or rubbing it, it's giving out more of a smell. So you're basically the pre-existing smell that you're just increasing it more.
But you put it on your clothes.
But if you rub, so you're asking a shaila, you're asking, what's the matter if I take that atzip samim and rub it onto my clothes? Maybe it will be enough isyal the reich, you mail the reich, because like if the guidelines are applying it to something new, like putting it onto a baguette or onto peda, that's when it comes a problem. Indeed, that'll be the same problem. Because I come to the Gemara here that the only problem here is, in other words, there's no malacha of putting on cheres because there's no mechabe and no mavich. Is where in the environment. We're speaking here about putting onto a peda. So, but I'm not so clear. I don't know exactly. I have to look this up really because it seems in the Gemara that the problem that we're discussing about putting psalm on cheres and creating a reich is not if you're doing a cheres. The similar question would be two questions we have now. We have to figure out for next year. If I would take the psalmim, put it onto the cheres, not to put peiris on top of it, but to put it into the house to have a nice smell in the house, would that be a problem of moilu dereyach? Or we say it's not going anywhere, it's fine. Another opposite shaila, the atzip samim that we spoke here about. Yes. If you would rub it on the clothes or on the peda, would that also be moilu? Or you say the atzip samim had the reich already before? So these are two things we have to look into to see what's the nekuda. But I get the feeling we learn the Gemara itself. It seems like you could say, if you say the pashtus, that will be very geschmack understanding of the Gemara. Because we're discussing here the shaila of applying the reyach ma'ashen the peiros. And I was saying, how are you ma'ashen the peiros to cheres or not? That can show and discuss this. Why does this thing come up now? It's behem shechmamish to the question of peiros. If it's about the environment should get it. I saw this solution last week. It should be on the Mishnah. The Mishnah says you should not put on tegecholim. Don't do a malacha to create ma'ash in your room, so you should have a shaila. What's about? Am I allowed to put psamim onto a cheres to create an environment to the room? But the Gemara doesn't have this discussion on the Mishnah. It has a discussion on the last piece of the Gemara where it's about ma'ash and the peiros. So we see here that this whole sugya, this argument now comes about, and the problem of meila dereyach when you're applying it to peiros. And not when you're putting it into the environment. Again, I'm saying, but not with certainty. I'm just telling you, but we could look into this weiter. And then the atzip samim also. If you take atzip samim and put it onto clothing, also be a problem because you're putting it onto the clothing. What do you mean? The levain we had Moshe asked last week also. The levain also has a smell to it. the levoy, the psamim. You smell the psamim, has psamim to it. So we had to mention this question last week. The psamim, you're putting it onto the cheres, and it creates a smell. Why is that different than the atzim psamim that you cut? What did the Gemara say? The atzim has already a smell before, and you're moisif, yeah? And by the psamim, or the levoina does not have a smell that you're moisif. So you could, if you're gonna say that the halal, that the nukud is about applying it to something else, then it could be God, but you have to be ma'ayin still in this. Let's look into Rashi. Rashi on top. The gechelis osur, the ikem mechaba mavid, as I said before. So on the gechelis, that's what we have been discussing now up until now. Shmuel says you can't. Now his question was gabi cheres. Shehesikoi, you put it, you masik it, you ignited it on top of cheres. The cheres itself was lit before yeah, is mutter. He says mutter. The kiboy leke, you don't have extinguishing here because there's no. Or you put a levay on top of the blech. You're not putting out any fire, right? No, and havara nami I havara. What are you doing havara in what? You're doing havara in the psamim getting ignited. So it says nami adeshinu he klachayad the leki sur the raisa. There's no sur the raisa. First miskas psikresha. Again, this Rashi is a big whole discussion of in Shvayetz. Komel dereicha. Where are you moil dereich? Rashi says here a very very wondrous thing. A lot of the achreinim, I wonder what Rashi means here. The whole, because Rashi says, we're thinking we are dereichin on the eichel because it comes from hemshich to the peiros.
Yeah.
What does Rashi say? On the cheres. Why say cheres?
You're creating a smell on the blech. Let's say the blech because
first of all, I don't want to smell to the blech, so it's like zweitens metachlik in the peiros. It's like it's attacking to the taz. So taz al also the Kuntas Acher mentions this Rashi. He says here. He mentions Pshat Pashat Rashi. Of a Pirush Rashi, the Pirush mailed the Rech Becheres. Rashi says you mailed in the Cheres because normally the flow of the Gemara should be you mailed the Rech in the Peire. We're going to the Hemshech in the fruit. So you see from Rashi that Rashi holds there's no Isur in being mailed the Rech in Peire Samashke. So according to Rashi, the Kohanim would be allowed to be mailed the Rech in the water and food. There's no Isur. So the whole Sifrim here was speaking about the problem of putting Reich into food. Rashi, there's no problem whatsoever. The Medayik from Rashi, the Rebbe said, "Aber Pirush Rashi, the Pirush Meil the Reich becheres mashmas kum teis lechaira shemash Meil the Reich bepeires lekula al meshori." Rashi learns, says the Alter Rebbe. He takes on the Taz, as mentioned before. But it's for Rashi. Rashi learns that there's no question about putting reich, the isur of this new isur of moil reich in food. There's no such thing. But mahaltish, I mean, the ba'ichlin leishayach isur hiladas reich. Rashi, no such thing moil reich only on clothing and anything else, and therefore he had to say the cheres starts smelling. Like as far as the Chacham Tzvi, the father of Yankiv Emden, the Ashkenaz. So he says in Sibbeis, but he says also, Aval ein kein das achreinim zal. The Rebbe says most achreinim don't agree with this maskana, and therefore you have all these different details about if the smell on the. We said at the beginning of this year, the smell. According to Rashi, this whole discussion, what it means, who cares what smells on the peda if you want to eat a better tasting fruit, or you want to have a smell. According to Rashi, there's no problem with creating a reich. But all this discussions, according to the Achreinim that we paskin, that there is a problem with meil reich. It depends how you do it. If you want to enhance the taste or the smell, etc. But that's the Kuntas Achrein here.
Okay.
Because you say there's an issue when you put it on coals about molded reich on coals.
We're going to have that also here.
So in other words, that kind of is
coals itself. But then the word, what's your kavanah? When you're putting meat on top of coals, putting meat on coals. So first of all, you're putting meat on top of coals. So you're putting away, you're extinguishing a little bit of the coals, and you also, but no problem. Hey, you're eating meat. There's no problem with that. But there's another way to do it. You could put it on top of the coal. You have to put it on the coal itself. You could put the meat on a grill, and put it on the coal. What are you doing? You're also putting a reich in the. There's a reich. You're creating a reich in the coal. What Baal said.
It's also pagam. No, if you're putting in the coal, who wants to
Those times people still they like it. Someone makes it black. If it's black, and people like sometimes their hot dogs when it's black, even with charcoal, and sometimes what they also make
restaurants they put the meat on the Java to black on the rusty iron. That's a geschmack.
Okay, so just a deal. Rashi, the Rashi says that Kamel the Reich Rashi says shenichnas becheres, not in the peiris, and then there's a whole to do about this in the Achrein. Shaloi hoya boy reich, before there was no reich in this cheres, and also with the Rabbanon. This is the Rabbanon. Why? Shamayli the davar chadash. Any creating something new is karev hu las la'isem malacha chadasha. So doing similar to doing a malach, and therefore one should not do it. He says, "Chufe kasa ashiroi lichpeis case mevusim turn over a case mevusim, a case that has in it a good smell of samim al hashiroim shel malbush lahachnis behein reach habesem shebe case to put into the clothing the reach the base that's in the case." He says, "Also the kamayli reach bishiroim." Here clearly kavan is to put the reich in the shirayim. The Pella Rashi before no one wants to put the reich in the cheres. You want to put the reich into the. That was a whole discussion. But that's shirayim is the silk. The silk, yeah, shiroi silk. My shnol mimoiloi umeriach by the time we learned over there. Mashilin in the Perek Mashilin. It's not Perek Mashilin. What's a goyis abach say? It says it's wrong. Come on, I mean, Bahamevi, not Mashilin. There it says Gabi atzip samim moiloi benetz ba'osav k'dei lahoitzi reichoi. You could rub it between your fingers to allow the smell to come out. Oy koitma, you could cut it. Shei makim akatima lach. The place where you cut it should be lach. The noise in the reach, it gives out the reach. With lushin kamaid, of course, we're not speaking about atzip samim that are connected to the tree. You can't disconnect. You can't cut on Yom Tiv. It means it's already tlushim, but even then, so he answered, the difference is because here you're just enhancing the original smell, and here you're creating a psanaya reich. Before we go to the next piece of Gemara, we're going to do the Tosfos, but the Tosfos spoke out about the Tosfos, about the cheres. So again, putting some on cheres, on boiling cheres, so there's no mechaber, but there's a question of mavi. Rashi says, therefore, it's not a malacha gemura. What does Tosfos say? Rashi says, Mishum she'ein kan kivui, you don't have kivui mechaber. V'hi mishum havara, you're doing havara on what? On the psamim. Have a havara kol achiyad, is havara kol achiyad with a shinoi, the shari, la soisa b'yom tiv, you're allowed to do on Yom Tiv. A malacha kol achiyad for the purpose of simchas Yom Tiv, to have fruits that are going to be with ma'ashim. Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzchak Piresh, the Baal HaTosfos, Rabbi Yitzchak says the Schapiro have a havara kedarka. He says no, it's called havara kedarka. Putting samim on top of a boiling cheres is called the regular way of doing it. So how could Rashi say it's not? In that case, what would be the heter? It's called malacha gemura, just like you can't do it. Shmuel says rafs on top of coals. You shouldn't do it also. The whole sug is about downgrading it to not a malacha gemura, and the question is about mother dereicha. But if it's mamash malacha gemura, what's the difference? So it's masbir. Also, if it's the chemashabir shalmi, in this peirik, what does the shalmi say? Maulad luke neir shal batol b'yom tiv. He has a question. Neir batol means a neir for no reason whatsoever. Some people say for COVID. Am I allowed to light a fire on Yom Tiv?
What's that, neshama, whatever.
Maybe, yeah. Even in neshama, yeah. That will be shy. Could you do a Yom Tiv or not? So Rabbi Yesi Osar v'Rabbanon Shoru. The Rabbanon in the Yerushalmi, they said you're allowed to go and do havara on Yom Tiv for no reason whatsoever. V'hatam manda Osar. Why would it be aser? We're speaking in our Gemara that you have to have some kind of tzarich Yom Tiv. Like I mentioned before, the havara lechalik yotzesa. He holds the Rabban of the Yerushalmi. They hold the reason why in Vayakel it says le'savara eish is for lechalik. The reason the oswan is also is no. The oswan is also understood. Lechalik yotzesa. It would have to be mechal to show you every malacha is separate, and therefore you're gonna get a chatos on every malacha separately. For having malacha, it's a regular malacha. V'asala says to be yomtiv. Uman the shari. Why did the Chachamim say that it's mutter to stam go light a candle? Because savur dilalav yotzesa. The reason why yotzesa, what it means, was taken out, like Savara Eish was mentioned separately, was to tell us that it's only a lav. So even on Shabbos, lighting fire is only a lav. the havara shalol tzayrich mutil asayse b'yamtiv. So on Shabbos take it would be allowed, but on Yom Tiv, it's even l'tech is considered nothing. You're not l'chatchil don't do it. They have av malacha. Therefore, it's av malacha. Therefore, you're allowed to do it. So the word is this chlal. It's not just a cheres. It's going to be any havara. According to this daya, is going to be a derabanan and not a problem deraisa, and that's the example from the cheres here. So you downgraded not putting on gacheles. It's deraisa. It's deraisa because you have mechabe. But even havara on the gecheles according to that day would not be a problem. You have mechabe, but on the cheres you don't have the mechabe anymore. The only thing you're dealing with is what with havara, and this Amanda holds. There's no problem with havara and deraisa and Yom Tiv. And therefore, it's only a derabbanan that can thing. And therefore, you can do it for Yom Tiv, for simplest Yom Tiv. Umiyu tastes, yeah?
Even if it's not shovel.
Yeah. No problem. Even not shovel chol nefesh.
Okay.
Because we're discussing here, even if not, because we're discussing here according to Shittas Rav. Rav says you're not allowed to do a malacha, putting it on the gacheles for the paydas, because Rav holds it's not shovel chol nefesh. And now we're discussing what if you do something less. You don't do it on the gacheles and the coals, you do it on cheres. Now is our discussion, do we say a problem with the reich or not, male the reich or not? That means this whole scenario is downgrading the malacha to a non-deiraisic issue. Okay. According to Rashi was because of shinui. According to Taisa was because this day holds bechlal havar is not deiraisa. And we just showed you a scenario where there's no mechabe. Mechabe l'kulam is deiraisa. But on cheres is no mechabe. So basically by being cheres in here, the difference between cheres and a gacholim and kol is only because this has mechabe. This has no mechabe. That's all. I havara. According to that day, even on the coals, the havara wasn't the problem because havara wasn't deiraisa.
In other words, Shavach Nefesh is only by it's Amraka to Raisa.
No. Rav holds that the making peiros, ma'ashin peiros, is not Shavach Nefesh. So I cannot. Yeah. So you can't do a malacha deiraisa to do something that's not Shavach Nefesh. Exactly. Exactly. Very good. But if it's only the Rabbanon, they'll allow you to do because you have some kind of simcha with having your peiros musha.
So you don't leave Shavach Nefesh.
Right.
Simple as enough.
Yeah. But the only problem is this one Amida holds is a new issue of Moili Dereicha. Therefore, you shouldn't do that also. Yeah. But besides, the other one says no, it's no Dereicha, and it's the Rabbanon, and it's even though it's not Shavach Nefesh, but here you could look on that. But if it would be the Raisa, we're following now Rav Shita, and if it would be the Raisa, it will be not allowed because of Shavach Nefesh. It's not Shavach Nefesh. And the Tessa goes a little weiter, telling the Gemara in Yishalmi.
We're saying Yatzer Rav is also by Rav, which is applying this to Rav. In order to say there's no malacha.
Yeah, but we're not. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So they hold. So so even the Gechon. So before Shemos asked in that case before, remember when he mentioned et ongechab when he said mechabe, the Amida said you have mechabe, and we asked why you say mechabe, why don't you say havara? Yeah. So Moshe should have said he doesn't hold of havara. If this shita is explaining Shmuel Rav Isur because of Isur of a malacha, he doesn't hold malacha because havara lelav yatzas. Because you see from the Hemshech Gemara that we're dealing here, it's lelav yatzas. According to this Amida, before when he mentioned it was dafke mechabe. Not because the Gemara says he mentions mechabe because it was just the first malacha you're doing. No, according to the Samaida, he mentioned mechabe because that's the only malacha deraisa. How about not deraisa at all? And then they discuss. But let's be focused. We're not going to having the in the Masifta Gemara. You can go. No, it's beautiful to me, but then you're not going to. Even this is slow now. We started to do from a few shurim that you went here. We started to go to the Taisvis. We go to the Taisvis innovating, but then we're doing much slower. If you're going to go to the Mashah and now to the other Rishonim, then it's Bechal going to be. There has to be some. Right, there has to be some boundaries. Okay, let's go weiter.
Respect.
So. Miu, okay. Umiu. So Tais is now speaking to us or those people living in Germany and France at the time. He's mavarin out to the people there. At halach l'maisa. Miu hasam ka'amar loy tasei v'litishtri. But still, don't think because there we say that Rabbanan come and say that you're allowed to do this on Yom Tiv. So the Yishami concludes that it doesn't acid it, but don't make it mutal chatchila. That means you should not go ahead and the idea of creating of doing this havara on Yom Tov. It's only if you're only doing Havor. Again, you're only doing Havor, you're not doing Mechabe. L'chayr, it seems from here, not doing Mechabe is not a problem. If you're only doing the Havor is not a issue on Yom Tov. Nevertheless, the Gemara there concludes one should. The Gemara there says Lo Tase, you can't answer it because you're not Mechabe is not a malacha, and not a serious malacha. Lo Tishri, and you should not also allow it. Umikan says Tosis to us. Umikan yesh lezoir melases havara shaloi letzorich. Don't conclude that if I'm only doing havara, I can even do it shaloi letzorich because l'chayra on Shabbos it's only allowed. So on Yom Tiv you could do it stam. Says still because the Gemara concludes not to do it. Before Shemar we ask on Tesis. I think it's the Pnei Yeshua asked on Tesis. A very strong question. Why is he speaking to us this way? We know the halach is anyways that l'chalik yotzes, not lav yotzes. Why is Tesis bavarining? Why is he telling us you should know after I told you here our Gemara is because he holds that l'lav yotzes, it went out to tell us it's a lav, downgrading it, and don't be under the impression you could go ahead and light stomach candle, yotzet licht on Yom Tiv, because Havar is no problem, because the Gemara there concludes one should still not do it. What's that to do? We don't paskin that l'lav yotzes. The psak din l'poyel is, even on Shabbos, Havar is punkt like all the other malachas. So this whole thing doesn't apply. The whole Yerushalmi about is according to that opinion that says that Havara is not as strict as the other malachis. So you should know, still don't light tishri, you should not allow it. So my taste is telling us today, you should know, you should be careful not to light a candle. Of course you can light a candle for no reason. By us Havara and Mechabe is the same exact thing. That's a Pnei Yeshua asked a starke kash on Teisvis. I don't know if I have to look what he answered, but that's what he says here. And let's see what Teisvis says. Teisvis says, one should be careful not to light a candle on you. Nevertheless said, after all said, still one should not do it. Now he's going to conclude. That's for sure asur. Why? Because you have mechaber, right? You have that's a kulam. Mikol means according to Rav. Also, if she has kivui in havara, kulam according to everyone, meaning it's according to Rav. Hai loy shari. It's not allowed. Hoyil the ein zed davar hashav l'chol nefesh. It's hashav l'chol nefesh. Actually, if you, like we said before, the halach is actually like Rav. It's mutter. But he's speaking here, these two Amiroyim are arguing in, like Shmuel, it's mutter. These two Amiroyim are arguing in Rav itself. But he means, Kulal means these two Amiroyim that argue over here, both hold like Rav, that it's also because it's because Davar she'ein shav l'chol nefesh. Afilu l'man d'shari havare, shaloi l'tzeirech klal Yerushalmi. Even the one that before says Havara, the fish yeshapamim l'tzeirech eichel nefesh, avol kibui the lo'ilam eini l'tzeirech tikun eichel nefesh vadi asur l'kula alma b'yomtiv. So Pashti is concluding over here that this that Yerushalmi said that a ner batola is allowed according to that opinion. It's only when we're speaking here about Havara only, but not when it comes to mechabe. Mechabe is a regular malacha, and there has to be a tzedek. And b'bald, it's not tzedek koladam. You can't allow a person to do mechabe. Now, Taisa is telling halacha l'payil. The Rava, the Shari, we didn't learn the Gemara yet. We're going to have it now in the Gemara. A Rava that allows, because that's talking about like Shmuel, you're allowed to go and do malacha Gemara. He says, the Shari, af al gabi gachelas hayin mishum, the choshev le'davar hashav l'chol nefesh, dim hayu ashirim tzrichim hein lekach. If the poor people would be rich, they would also like it. So that's the only thing, they don't have the accessible. The pay halacha is like Shmuel. It's defined as Tzoyrech Kol Adam, and the whole Teisvis was really in Rav's opinion, and the two Amiroyim that followed up, only halacha discussing this in Rav itself, the difference between Mechabe and Mavir. But we pass like Rava, which is Achrim, and he passes like Shmuel, which is Mutter. Now we're going to see Rava's opinion, where Rava says this. So says the Gemara, Rava Amar, yeah? Rava Amar, let's try to finish up to the Mishnah. Rava says, we have the Gemara, the line starts as Reiche. Al gabi gacheles nami mutter. Pash like Shmuel. Passes on gabi gacheles. You could put samim on gacheles. It creates an odor to be able to give to your peiros, because davar hashav l'chol nefesh. Everyone would like to have peiros that have a smell to it. Mida dehave the problem of a new problem, a problem of moilu dereicha. She says no, like you said, mida to have a bisra gumri. Gumri means on coals. Bisra is basar. So, like you said, the same idea of moilu dereicha. First of all, you're making you're putting. Why do you let a person put it on the coal? Taka provided. You let him put the psamim, the incense on top, or the case of the basar on top. You have to cook basar to eat for sure. No shaila. None of us. We don't really care if the coals get a smell also of the basar itself. So too, we don't really care if the cheres according to Rashi or the peiris according to us get a smell from the smell. And it's not called moilu dereicha. That's it. Okay. Darash Rab Gvia was dus from Rashi. Mibei Ksil Rav Gvia from the city called Ksil. He was darshaned. Where was the location where he said this drash? A pischa de Beit Reish Galusa, on the entrance to the Beit Reish Galusa. That's where he said this drash. What did he darshan? He said such a word. He said ketura shari. We don't know what that means. Ketura. He says ketura shari. It's allowed to do ketura. My ketura. What do you mean by ketura? So there's two possibilities. Iktura bidei. Doing ketura is one activity of Rashi explains.
Like smoking cigarettes.
No, that's not. That's the second. Ketura, he means like from folding clothing, to make a professional fold in a clothing a person has on his pants, or he has on his they speak of gloves or socks. He has a fold, like you have people have on the bottom of the pants. They have it goes up. What is it called? The pleats, for example, right? Making pleats. But all other Russian Rashi on the side you have here. It says making knots. Kesher, kesher is cutter is kesher. This is something that's a ma'aser uman. So if you mean you're allowed to go and press the clothing and create pleats on Yom Tiv, right? You can't do that. It's a ma'aser uman, should not be allowed. Or according to the other gears here on the side, it means creating a professional knot, a kesher, also not allowed. It's not, I mean that. So first he said, Ketura shari, do you mean creating pleats, pressing and creating pleats on Yom Tiv? It's a ma'aser uman. It's if it's a professional thing, it's a craftsman. Ila ashen, if you ma'ashen peiris, as we're speaking here about, also why they come moilu dereicha? You moilu dereicha. But Ashi, no, I'm nisa niale. I said this, and I said the name of someone very great. That what? That la'olam la'ashen. But we pass like Shmuel like Rava. We have a bisra gumri. We have the inya bisra gumri. No, we skipped a few lines here. We did before. Sorry, I skipped a few lines. The first lashon is that the shaila was mechabe. We have two issues here: putting psamim on top of the cholim, and now we're going to discuss two issues. Either you're doing mechabe, that we discussed before, and now we have a new concept, a new thing of your dereicha. So according to the first lashon, the debate was, what do you mean? Do you mean pressing clothing? My assuming you can't. No, I mean putting psamim on top of the cholim. You're doing kibui. Then he says, I hold you can do it because it's a tzedek kol adam. The next lashon is going to be the same beginning. What do you mean by ketayres? Does it mean pressing clothing? He says, no, I mean creating. You're doing moilu dereicha. I hold you can do moilu dereicha. So that's going to be the lashonis of the Gemara. Let's do it inside. Iktura b'day, doing with your hands, pressing. Ma'asumanu. Ila ashen also the hog kamechabe. You're doing kivas. I said before. You're doing extending. Amalei Ashi leilom la'ashen. Midahava bisra gumri. Like I said before. Some people say amalei meimer my ketura. What does it mean? Ketura ketura b'day. If you're doing it out with your hands, ma'asu uma and ma'asu umani. Ila ashen also the kamel dereicha. Either because ashen amrisa nile. Shvei the gavarabba amrisa nile. And the name of someone great. It's Rava. The Leila Ma'ashin, you're allowed to do Ma'ashin. But to have a Bisra Gumri, so you're allowed to be Ma'ashin Peiros. Shmuel passing Ma'ashin Peiros. And the way, there's no problem, with doing it on Gecholi, with doing Mechaba Malacha Gemura, because it's Tzedek Kol Adam, Shmuel says. Everyone likes to have Peiros. And there's definitely no problem with creating a Reich. It's a Darabanan. Like we like Kolshk, it's a Kavachaymer. Because if you're allowed to create the Reich with coals, which is the rice still you could do because you consider the peiris that have in it ishun, a tzedek kol adam. How much more so you don't have a problem of creating smell in a fruit, because l'chayre is tzarich. It's we said it's not a halacha gemura. That's only the rabbanon that get concerned. So for sure, it's not a problem. That's the halacha. That's what Rashi's. Rav says, Rav Omer Agabi Gecheles Nami Mutter. You're allowed to put the meat on the Gecheles itself. Shmuel as Shmuel, like we said in last Amid. Shmuel says that it's a why the Eichel Nefeshu and Eichel Kol Nefesh also. Ishun Peiris Ze v'Shav L'Chol Nefesh. Everyone would like and enjoy a Peiris and an arm Ushon. He mishum kivui v'avara v'luder eichel. Puts all together. If you're going to think about l'chayre, we'll be mechaber the coals, or we'll be maver the psamim, or now we speak about you creating a nureach. No problem. Midahave abisra gumri ike kol hani v'shari. Putting meat on top of the coal, you're creating
nothing like it.
All that. No problem. That's what it is. Ketura shari kach darish lehem lepirish b'dvarav. He didn't explain what ketura means. Iktur b'yed Rashi she'oisin lebate shekayim bate dayim shel chaluki hanoshim shemekamtin oison al eitz. You split, you bend, you make bends, right? Came into the fold. Yeah, it's cholok al oil agudo shel kashim. The Kohen gives the French word ma'is umanans asur. It says kitu loshin kesher. It's another loshin. Kesher is a knot. It's another thing here. And it's right there. Iktura loshin kitur, like we have kitur loshin akivshon hainu laashen, because kitur could also mean creating smoke, as we're speaking in our sugya. Also mishum the meilreich. We mentioned the heichi darish shari. How could he darshin that it's mutter? Bisra gumi is a meilid nami reich bepchomim, like you said. Bepchomim means in the coals. That's you mentioned right before. You meilid reich. You see Rashi here. Bisra gum, putting basar on top of coals. Where do we see here meilid reich? What kind of reich are you meilid? And also, and what is it tangible? Meilid reich in the environment of a smelling of meat. Before we learned our Gemara, we thought to learn that the problem will be only if it's attached to something. Dr. Rashi, so Rashi says,
this is like Rashi again.
No, like before, like a cheres. Actually, before says on the cheres, and here he says on the pchomim, not in the environment. So Taka, this is yeah. And before the parallel was because they had Peiris also Yom Ashen. There, the other Rishonim speak that the issue is going on the Peiris. So not the cheres, the cheres going to Peiris. That's the discussion. Here, the basar is going onto the coals. The coals create smoke, and the smell of meat where? In the environment. Or on the coal itself. Yeah. So Rashi says the problem of Meil Derech would be when it's epis on something, either on the Peire or on the Cheres or on the Chomi, but not stam in the environment. Maybe. I have to look this up. Okay. So Hilod Daserech would not be a problem if it's just in the ear. Maybe. Okay, let's go next piece of Gemara. Vaisin Gdim Kulos to the mission to Rabbi Yisrael. Tudus Ish Reimi. Tudus was a great person from Roim. Hini as Bnei Roimi Lechel Gdim Kulos Belel Psachim. He would have the minig that the people in Rome would eat this Gdim Kulos roasted with its inside and the side. Of course, we discussed in the mission what it means Kulos. And Sholchulei, they sent him, the Chazal sent him messages. If not for the fact that you're this great person, will make you a nidui. Why? This is the problem. You're giving Bnei Yisrael kochim outside of it, the Beis HaMikdash. In fact, he's giving kochim. He's not doing that. He's in Rome. He wasn't saying this is a Korban Pesach and making a Obama Chatzom in Rome. He's a tzaddik and out to do chutz. No, he was just making it like we said before, similar. So he says it's similar to kachim, and you should not be doing it. So we have here Rabbi Sabag, this union of discussed before of doing it. Of this is so when it says here mekulos, because not just roasting. Mekulos is mamish the way it's done. You take the spit, you put it to the hand's hole, and spear, and you have the insides. You put it on the outside. How it's done? Mekulos means a soldier has an arm. That's called mekulos. That's mamish identical. That's medina the Gemara is also already. But today we have the minhagim. It says in Shulchan Aruch about stam even sli, like I mentioned last year. Some stam do have the minhag to eat sli. Depends what it is. But definitely in that fashion itself is also. Abba Gamliel did it also. I'm guilty also, but the Chazal were against it. On Pesach night, it's nire kim kotchem b'chut. Let's say Rashi. So Rashi, Tudasat chochem gadol v'nechbad. If not for that, your Tudas was a great wise chochem and a respected person. So kotchem so that he never made the animal hektish. My kor of lahachel kotchem yike. What's similar to Bar Kotchim? Heichachim Lias Kotchim. Hagis Kotchim. Vein Adam Nekmagdishon. He didn't come and say this sheep should be the Korban Pesach. And he shechter on the Mizbeach. He didn't do that. He just took regular meat and would do it this way. Alakein Kotchim, similar to Kotchim. V'hachi Sholchu latest is that She'atam Machilus Yisrael Kein Kodeshim. The onlooker will think, Amru Hugdushu LePesach. You makdish this before Pesach, and therefore you're giving. Just to mention Halacha Shulchan Aruch very bekitzer here.
So the just Pesach you're not allowed to.
Oh, so there's a two simanim Shulchan Aruch. When I can't go through now, it's short actually. There's Tov Ayin Vav, there's Zayin Sifim about Pesach and Hilchos Pesach. So it says, that is like you're saying, it's Mokim Shenogu. That means like you have the Mokim Shenogu talking. It says, Mokim Shenogu lechil bosa tzli b'leil Pesach oichlim. So right, you have here that those talking Mokim Shenogu. But also, Mokim Shenogu shaloi lechil mishum gzeira shema yoimru Pesach. Who you might say Pesach? Osur lehem l'shanis min hogam v'af b'nei machreim, the children after them. Einam l'shoyim l'shanis minag avisayim v'af misha bo lodu shom mimokim shenogu lechil. Also, you shouldn't do like minigam Medina. Then you have the whole arichis over here. According to everyone, also that's for sure. And actually, it says pirush. It says in parentheses, mukulasum lashon mezuyan, armored, because it looked like an armored person that has a weapon sticking out of his body. So too, the sheep that the goat you put on the Korban Pesach, you put the insides of the animal that were allowed to be eaten. You put it on the outside of the body to be roasted together. So it looked like armor kulos and armor mizuya. Shakarov ubnei meyav b'shas liyasoy him tluyin l'mayla miroy sha'oymit sidoy, or they're hanging on the side on top of the head. Then it looks like an armor, like a head covered by the or on the side it's sidoy. Kigibed mizuy, looking like a mighty person who has klizayim. Shakayv and achoyshis l'mayla because his iron is copper cap is how do you call it? Helmet is not present. Uklizeni b'tzide. The hainu gdi oy keves solui kuli kechod. This tak is not allowed. So today no one allows this. Amber taketzli itself apparently is not to have also. You see what is what's not allowed. And there's another interesting simon here about saying something even as LePesach is not allowed. But don't even identify it. Maybe someone's going to think something here. Oh, he's makdish a Korban Pesach. He didn't see that I was just taking this milk and said this milk is kosher LePesach. Some people say kosher al Pesach for that reason. Because LePesach means a person can hear, oh, the seed in his house is makdish a Korban Pesach. And even if it's a chicken, but chicken can't belong in the Mizbeach at all. Chickens don't go to the Mizbeach. Only two types of bird could go. No, for sure, the people are still decent Shulchan Aruch question. You could look into Shulchan Aruch and you could see the halachas when you get to this.
You say this is
if you said lepoil, and every item also you have to